Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Yang. I'm a partner with ADL Ventures. And in addition to my position at ADL, I've been a founder, an advisor, and board member for a number of clean energy startups that have both succeeded and failed at proposal applications, both large and small. We'll also be joined throughout this learning module by other ADL colleagues that have sat on both the applicant and reviewer side of the table. So we want to talk today about sound proposal preparation and process management. And when we start this conversation, we want to highlight that sound proposal preparation isn't just for FOA and grant applications. Why is this important? Of course, our primary purpose is to cover the basics of a funding opportunity announcement in solar energy, but the broader benefit of mastering this process should actually pay much bigger dividends for your business. There's more than $300 billion of Inflation Reduction Act funding related to clean energy. These actually take on many different forms. The funding under this funding opportunity announcement is a collaborative award for research, development, and demonstration. If successful, this could open up many other funding avenues for you, which are also competitively bid in a similar way. These includes tax credits like the 48C, various block grants for deployment, which will be passed through state and local governments. And perhaps the largest scale and most visible DOE program is the Loan Guarantee Program, which recently held a very successful deployment summit in DC to showcase its enhanced deal pipeline and streamlined process. Low-cost government borrowing has been an important pillar for some of the most successful clean energy companies, such as Tesla, which paid off its DOE loan ahead of schedule. However, it's important to remember that programs like LGP actually require millions of dollars of investment and multiple full-time heads. So think of this proposal as building or fixing up your starter home. You'll learn a lot of things, mostly from mistakes that you'll use again to help fund future efforts. So when we get into the details, one of the first things we want to think about is project assessment and resourcing. Of course, we shouldn't take it for granted, even if you've submitted a concept paper successfully, that it's a no-brainer to apply. We would note that FOAs are extremely time-consuming for small businesses, and often submitting to an FOA may mean slowing down a fundraising process, a strategic partner negotiation, or some other critical operational activity. The final decision is yours, but at the end of the day, it's critical to remember how much these funding opportunities may mean, particularly to entrepreneurs from a cost of capital standpoint. Today, $1 million of capital may require you to sell as much as 25 to 50% of your company to investors. And in some cases, selling that much early on makes it difficult to bring in other investors or strategic partners at a later stage. Winning this FOA would provide great validation, which helps your private sector pursuits, including increasing the valuation of your company. Losing can often be a great learning experience as well, which helps you prepare for the next FOA. And personally, the majority of successful grant proposals I've been involved in were preceded by at least one failed attempt on the same idea.
Hey everyone, my name's Ryan Dunphy. I co-manage our buildings team here at ADL Ventures, and I'm also responsible for our grant strategy here on the team. So I wanted to talk to you today about how to evaluate funding opportunities from agencies you might be looking at, and evaluate whether they're really a fit for your organization, your technology, your company. So first question we ask when we look at a funding opportunity is, do we have enough time before the submission is due to actually do this thing? Is it, a page, kind of concept paper, executive summary? Is it 5 pages? Is it 20 pages? We really get a sense of how much work is involved, and do we honestly have enough time to do a good job of this before the due date? And if maybe we've got a past proposal that we can leverage that looks pretty similar to this, that adjusts our time frame. Maybe we can do something a little closer to the end date, but really being honest about how much time we have. From that, kind of evaluating your fit for the proposal involves, is this an industry we've succeeded in before? Is this a market we know really well? Following that, is this similar to work we've done in the past? So is there other projects we've done that we can kind of recycle a lot of the concepts and the work and expertise we developed as part of that work and leverage it for this new opportunity? That obviously makes your workload more efficient, which is good to know. It also means that, it's something you've won in the past and you're more likely to win this new proposal. And then the final question that is a really central one for us is, are there existing partners in our network that we can leverage to meet the requirements of the grant? The last question there is, what's the commitment from those partners? Is it just a simple letter of support where we get those folks together and kind of just ask for a relatively benign statement supporting our idea, or do they need to be giving their own contributions, we call matching contributions of staff time or other resources to the proposal, so it's actually quite a bit more involved, in which case you're going to need to be thinking about the negotiations you'll be making with those partners, which then feeds back into your opening question about timeline and whether you have enough time before submission, both for your own work and for your potential partners to respond to the opportunity. So I hope that was valuable for you in your grant pursuits and wish you the best of luck.
The decision calculus is very different, of course, for new applicants with limited resources versus existing applicants that have some level of funding. So for new applicants, particularly those that might be a single person business or have a very small team, having been through this myself, founding a company from scratch, I don't want to sugarcoat the difficulty of the process. Even a fast proposal writer may spend upwards of 40 hours on the technical volume alone when building from scratch, and another 20 hours on supporting documentation. On paper, you may see that and say, hey, it's only a week or a week and a half of work, but keep in mind that these time estimates mean focused, productive time working only on the proposal. If you're an entrepreneur, particularly an unfunded one without financial support, the only time you may have which fits this description is nights and weekends when you're not busy trying to raise money, develop a product, or do one of many other things you've got on your laundry list. Realistically, I've found a mental block for new content generation also limits you to about 2 to 3 productive hours per day of effective proposal drafting from scratch. That's why planning out every day between now and the deadline is critical. For return applicants, certainly the job gets much easier if your company has one or both of 2 critical things: prior funding applications and staffing support. All FOA proposals, including this one, are modular in nature, and there's some introductory company info and other core technical and commercial content that can be cut and pasted. Companies which have staff may be able to further divide the work between individuals based on expertise. Realize, however, that the bar usually gets higher for somewhat established businesses too, particularly ones that have been funded on similar projects. Developing a unique value proposition and tailoring your message specifically to the FOA strategic requirements is critical. The first thing to do in any successful proposal is to control what you can control and make sure you aren't knocked out of consideration by what you may dismiss as low-hanging fruit. Keep in mind that non-conformance to any part of the FOA, including not filling out a form properly or not submitting that form on time, is grounds for dismissal from the process. With that in mind, we suggest you map backwards from the proposal submission date and make sure that the most controllable and standard inputs, such as admin forms, are understood and accounted for from the beginning. Those of you working with larger partners, such as national labs or universities, may need to meet certain requirements that are routed through multiple departments at a partner organization. And these may be even earlier than the DOE's deadlines. Even if you're only submitting your own forms, know that this is a significant undertaking. This is why when it comes to preparing for proposal deadline, we actually recommend that most, if not all, of the checklist items other than the technical volume are done 3 to 5 days before submission, and certainly no later than 1 to 2 days before submission. The technical volume is the heart of where your creativity and mental effort will be invested. We all have different working styles under pressure, but it's rare that having multiple deliverables bothering you while you're looking to put the finishing touches on your $1 million document will actually help your proposal quality. It's also important to realize that editing always takes way longer than you think, and mistakes increase as you lose valuable rest and sleep leading up to the deadline. It's important to anticipate that once you've gotten what you think is a final technical volume, you may still need to scrub it 2 to 3 times to get typos and other obvious imperfections out of it. When I first started working on government proposals, many still had to be sent in hard copy. So by necessity, we had to get everything done 1 day in advance or more to make a FedEx or UPS deadline. It's a reality that builds great discipline, though even in those days, we always had the occasional time when someone would miss the deadline and we'd have to fly the proposal to a national lab or some other location for submission.
You should approach government funding opportunities and proposal preparation as you would any project. Funding opportunities often require multiple documents to be submitted, ranging from your technical narratives to partnership letters to administrative documents. The first step is to thoroughly evaluate the funding opportunity to understand the submission requirements, proposal scope, goals, materials, and the deadlines. With that in mind, you can then work backwards and begin to segment your major deliverables into work streams and subtasks. If you're working within a team, it's important to clearly delineate and delegate ownership of those work streams to the responsible team member. This will help avoid confusion, duplicative work, and really prioritize who is working on what and when. It can be helpful to set internal deadlines and milestones for those subtasks as well. In some cases, the start of one task may be dependent on the completion of another, and you should budget buffer time accordingly. Milestones can also be incredibly valuable to set guardrails, maintain your motivation and productivity, as well as keeping your proposal on track. Most funding opportunities offer a glimpse into the scoring criteria or scoring rubrics. These can be valuable tools to help you understand where to focus a majority of your efforts and guide your priority work streams when you're planning out your project and your timeline. Related to this, letters of support, commitment, and partnerships can be time-consuming. Relationship building requires significant time investments to understand mutual benefits, contributions of each partner, and foster trust. You should plan to start those conversations as early as possible to secure those meaningful commitments. Risk identification and mitigation is another crucial aspect of developing technologies and in your proposal writing. As you develop your timeline, it's important to identify areas, subtasks, or work streams that may be more difficult to accomplish and budget your time accordingly. As Frank noted, review cycles and editing can be lengthy processes. You should aim to have a complete draft of your submission materials roughly a week before the submission deadline. This will provide you with enough buffer time to review the requirements, scoring criteria, and thoroughly edit and review your application to ensure compliance with the funding opportunity. Allocating a week for review and finalization also provides a buffer in case of unexpected delays earlier in the process. By understanding the funding requirements, segmenting tasks, and setting milestones, you can create a comprehensive and effective timeline that increases the likelihood of securing the funding opportunity and keeping you on track for submission.
We'll talk now about administrative inputs. Though nothing is easy about the process, the administrative forms contain required info about your company that is almost certainly in existence already for anyone who has a legitimate registered commercial business or other entity. The SF-424 is a general intake form which contains critical information about the name of your proposal, the program it is under, and various other details like the budget size and the location where the work is being performed. Some of these things can change as you edit the scope, so make sure you know the interdependencies and update the form when a related input has been updated. The SF-LLL is a lobbying disclosure form. For most small businesses, it should be easy as you don't have the resources to engage registered lobbyists. If you are a larger organization that does, we would suggest seeking support from a power connector such as ADL to discuss this topic and making sure your in-house general counsel or outside legal counsel signs off on the info in the form. Shifting now to the overall approach on the technical volume. The technical volume is the heart and soul of your proposal. It's the actual document which will be read in the most detail by merit reviewers, and it has the most upside and the downside in terms of either qualifying you or disqualifying you for funding. For starters, know that there are formatting requirements such as fonts, spacing, and page numbers, which are 100% non-negotiable. In fact, I've had the unfortunate experience of having the last page of a proposal cut off in the submission process because I went over the page limit. It simply will not be reviewed if it is over the page limit. Take my word for it. On a lighter note, look at the reviewer weighting and start to look for all the areas you should emphasize and highlight in order to separate yourself from the competition. There are a lot of opportunities to sell your work in this document, and it's generally a good idea to break up your page allocations roughly based on this weighting. Make sure you've addressed all the bullet points brought up in the FOA in at least a cursory manner, and make sure you've done so in very plain and understandable language.
Hi, I'm Gianluca Roscioli, CEO of Archilus Solutions, here today to give you some tips on how to write funding applications. If, like me, you did some doctoral studies, then you're probably an expert already on how to write a scientific paper or how to give a talk to a conference. So you can easily go in details of the science behind your technology. But for funding applications, the tip that I got from MIT during my career as an entrepreneur, the best tip, was to try to explain your technology as if you were trying to explain it to a fourth grader. So try to make it simple, at least at the beginning, and then you dive down into the technology and into the details. But the first thing, the first few paragraphs should be something that everybody in the world can actually understand, even a kid. So start from there, start to try to understand it better, try to explain it to somebody that is not in your field, and then write this paragraph and send it out so that people can give you feedback. That's the way I started, because that's the way you can have other people understand what you're doing, and then slowly build up on the details, slowly go to the point that you want to achieve. But remember, this is not a scientific paper, this is not a scientific presentation to a conference. This is something that other people that have the same degree as you but not the same knowledge need to read and need to understand. So start simple and dive deeper. Thanks.
There is technical nuance in every FOA, and when you think about the technical volume, one of the key things you need to do is compare yourself versus state-of-the-art technology. There are a lot of technical differences between companies, even within the same FOA, so it's impossible for us to cover specifically how each applicant should write about their technology. Software technology could be very different from a solar cell or solar module, which could be very different from a balance of system component. However, there is some fundamental framing that is critical, which is how your product or service offering compares versus its competition. Competition could be a directly competitive product, or it could be an alternate approach your customer uses to solve the same issue. Perhaps one very clear example to highlight is solar cell cost and performance. Everyone developing an advanced solar cell technology has both some present results as well as future expectations around the theoretical limits of what their technology can do if funded under this project. This must be laid out very clearly, not only in terms of what you will do and how you will do it, but in terms of why it actually matters versus what other options are available in the market today. There is a common tendency by startups to dismiss or ignore incumbent technology, or at minimum, understand how cheap and how good they really are. Incumbent technologies are incumbents for a reason. They're known, they perform well enough for someone to buy them, and the companies which produce them are devoting most of their investment to upholding these product lines as opposed to doing pioneering research. So make sure you're being appropriately optimistic, but also benchmarking your work objectively versus what exists already. So this could include industry journals, equity research reports, market research reports, and other sources which have objective third-party data about what companies in your sector are doing. Moving on and thinking about in the technical volume how we write about impact, we find that most FOA and prize applicants, which ADL supports, are not only passionate about their work, but that the passion actually comes through pretty well in the way they tell their story. However, the story you tell to an angel investor or corporate partner may not fully fit the needs and strategic priorities of this FOA or other competitively bid projects you're pursuing. So it's really important to frame impact and results in terms of the program goals. This is where our experience and support will hopefully be useful, particularly for first-time applicants. At a high level, your work needs to be addressing the program goals directly. If it's not, and there's even a question of whether your technology fits, we'd actually suggest reconsidering the substantial effort that's required to apply, even if you've submitted a concept paper. Most FOAs are developed based on years of prior research on needs and problem areas in a subject matter field, and are based on DOE's general program goals as well as specific viewpoints developed by the sponsoring office within DOE. Don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole and apply for something you're only marginally qualified for. Also, at the end of the day, your project may have many merits, but keep in mind that you're submitting this for DOE funding and not for any other government agency or outside sponsor. At a more granular level, when you talk about impact, some discussion and high-level estimation of the energy generation or savings impact, as well as the related impact on emissions, is the most important basic framing that can't be skipped when talking about impact. So a big part of the technical volume is the work plan. Your work plan and milestones are critical because they constitute the detail behind what you're actually asking for funding to do, and will be used not only to decide on the award, but to potentially renew it after the first budget period. You've heard the term SMART milestones from the FOA and other walks of life. And as a good work plan begins with writing SMART milestones and not dumb milestones, as we like to jokingly call them, we've unfortunately, we all fall victim sometimes to doing that. So just because a milestone is SMART from the standpoint of the acronym in the FOA, it doesn't mean it's truly SMART from the traditional perspective. That's why when we at ADL think of SMART milestones, we like to say that being truly smart is an art, achievable, realistic, and targeted. Firstly, both the budget period goals and the end of project goals have to be ones that are not only economically and technically feasible, but ones your team can achieve. Too often we see teams fall into the trap of proposing something to be done quickly in hopes of getting an attractive application out the door, then having unrealistic assumptions uncovered by a reviewer, or even worse, getting the project and then having the funding at risk for cancellation because the potential was oversold. The best predictor of future events is past ones. If you have developed similar products or services or have internal data from prior initiatives, use that as a planning guideline. If not, supplement this with external data from your industry on how long things take and how much things cost. Even when an individual milestone is achievable and realistic, the plan itself may not be if you don't create a holistic and well-balanced timeline for how your project will be executed. Interdependencies are important, and thinking about linkages between different parts of your project, as well as outside equipment, labor, or material items that could cause delays in our volatile post-COVID world, are critical. You can't scale up a solar cell until you actually have the equipment and materials to do so. Sometimes those things take months to acquire. Sometimes the equipment itself has components or parts themselves which are difficult to get. Even less research-heavy projects focusing on things like balance of system components and or project development have commodity materials like steel or wiring that have fluctuated greatly in availability and price. Again, it's impossible for us to cover all the contingencies for every project, but keep in mind here that you can't build something out of nothing, and reviewers will appreciate you've thought through that risk. Lastly, targeting the right milestones for commercial validation and FOA conformity is critical as well. Your goal is to utilize the FOA funding to develop a product or service that will then get commercial traction in the form of private sector funding and sales. Any milestone that does not directly address one of the key FOA criteria might be good for a scientific publication, but is not good for this space and time-limited application. Now shifting over to the commercial side a little bit, the market transformation plan, or the commercialization plan as it can be called in some other FOAs, is typically only a few pages in suggested length, which creates a temptation among technologists to think about it as unimportant. The review weighting makes it very clear that it is important, and you should expect to spend 2 to 3x the time on a per page basis working on this as you would on technical content. Most principal investigators are world experts in their research field, but they're not world experts or even somewhat expert at all in how to commercialize their technology. So we suggest a few simple concepts for making this less daunting. Use existing frameworks online, such as the NSF I-Core program and other programs which help early stage entrepreneurs with market discovery and value proposition development. Take the key concepts from those programs and run a condensed version of that playbook here to get the best possible market transformation plan. Expect to talk to at least 10 key stakeholders for the technology during your application preparation, and be prepared to answer basic questions in your plan about the market potential and positioning of your technology within your industry value chain. The business model canvas shown here is a tool which allows you to map out the key elements of your business in concise fashion, and some of you may find doing a quick one useful prior to drafting your plan. It's also really important that founders reflect their vision of what their company will be and what type of business model they want to pursue. For example, being a material supplier to a larger manufacturer or system integrator is very different than producing and selling your own product directly into the market. Even when you've decided to produce and sell, there are huge differences between selling to distributors versus selling directly to project developers, as an example. Before writing the market transformation plan, make sure you sit down with your company mission and vision statement in hand and think through a 1 or 2 line summary of what products and service you will deliver, how that will be used to generate income, and from whom, i.e. who are your key customers. So there are a few other pieces that we want to go through here. There's generally, with most FOAs, there's a SOPO, or Statement of Project Objectives. In some cases now, DOE requires that only to be filled out after the award. But for those of you that are doing a SOPO, either for your application or for another award, the SOPO is usually one of the last pieces of information to be generated because it overlaps with the work plan and the technical volume. Again, we want to emphasize the importance of using SMART milestones. And secondly, the SOPO typically only mentions prime recipients. So for those of you that are proposing projects that have many sub-recipients and teaming partners, editing the SOPO can be a little bit more complex because you're going to have to anonymize references to those folks and talk about it from the viewpoint of the prime only. And of course, that makes sense because at the end of the day, the prime contractor is the one that's legally bound to DOE's terms and conditions once an award is received. The DEIA plan, one thing that's been very prominent in DOE, DEIA plans in recent FOAs is what they call the Justice 40 criteria. And so I think for those of you that are not familiar with those, which I was not the first time I went through one of these, go through it, review it in detail, and make sure those concepts are incorporated and covered. And I would also add, with DEIA, this is an opportunity to take a very holistic approach that spans your operations, your hiring, your customer deployment, the community that you work in. There's a lot of different places where you can show DEIA in your business, and this is an opportunity to, without a lot of extra data and research work like the other parts of the proposal, add another very compelling piece to your story, which is obviously also important from a mission perspective with any of these proposals, because this is where some of the biggest impact can come to previously underrepresented audiences and communities. And then lastly, the community benefits plan is maybe what I would say somewhat connected to, but not completely the same as writing about DEIA. So this is going to write very broadly about economic benefits to the supporting community and the stakeholders involved. So this could include things like direct job creation, indirect and induced job creation, other economic benefits like synergies in the supply chain or workforce training. There's a countless number of things you could include in the community benefits plan. But whereas the traditional DOE proposal focused a lot about impact, as we talked about earlier, with the impact from an energy and emissions standpoint, today the community benefits plan I would think of as an extension of that, right? So if you think about not only what criteria is needed from an energy and emissions standpoint for this to be compelling, think about from a community benefit standpoint what you can add on top of the project, and really think about this as, again, this is required, and although the weighting may not be as heavy as the other sections, there's no alternative to filling it out. It has to be filled out. And in fact, these last two things that we talked about can be very, very valuable elements of your proposal, as we've seen from a couple that we've done successfully. Also for both of these, I think I'd be the first to admit, even as an entrepreneur on the business side, you're far from an expert in either of these areas. And certainly for those of you that have more of a technical background, some of this language could seem fairly foreign. We suggest talking to some outside consultants that are friendly if you have an opportunity to do so during the process without spending any money. And certainly I would think about getting some quotes from DEIA or community benefits oriented consultants if that is a significant portion of your proposal. And so those are things, again, that are newer in these FOAs, and I think they're here to stay and will continue to be an important part of it. And so don't want to shortcut any of that work. So in closing, it's been a real pleasure for ADL team members here to share this info with you. Certainly the FOA landscape is always evolving, and as you've seen today, there's new twists that come in and out of these things every couple of years. But I think that the core project management and process management expectations, remain very similar. And a lot of the content, as you've seen, both in information that's been provided by ADL, as well as other content from UACI and other power connectors, this content doesn't change a lot over time relative to commercial RFPs, where one commercial RFP, even from the same group, could be completely different from the one before it. So I think by reviewing these modules and learning about some of the tricks of budgeting and planning and writing a technical volume, you're already off to a great start. And of course, you've got the support of the Power Connector team, behind you. So we wish everybody the best of luck, and certainly look forward to engaging in a lot of additional, high quality discussion around this topic, and maybe put together a winning proposal. Have a great day.